Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Sam's Healing Podcast. Today, I have an old friend, someone that you have probably seen on my videos before if you've watched me for any length of time. Her name is Amanda Asproni. Amanda, thank you for joining me today.
Hi.
So we've done a number of videos on sexual abuse, defense mechanisms of the betrayed, narcissistic supply, and even self-sabotage. I think it would be great for maybe the new viewers who are just getting used to the podcast, who used to maybe watch videos or haven't ever watched any of our videos. Why don't you tell everybody your qualifications, what you do, and maybe a tad bit of how you're an actual survivor of infidelity as well.
Sure. So my name is Amanda Asproni. I'm a clinical psychotherapist. I'm specialized in infidelity recovery, relationship intimacy, complex PTSD, betrayal, and developmental trauma. It's a lot. The reason that I'm qualified in all of those areas is because I've been through all of those things personally myself.
And do you feel like since you've been through it just gives you better rapport with those who feel so alone, so isolated, and just like they're on an island trying to heal?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's why when someone is looking for help, they may lean towards someone like me who's been through it. It's how I ended up with Rick Reynolds from Affair Recovery, because he wasn't just clinically trained. He wasn't just theoretically trained. He also had lived it and walked it himself.
Now, if anybody's watched our old videos, they would know you're a straight shooter, which I know that your clients love. I love. You are someone who doesn't really mess around. I mean, you have a full caseload. You've become kind of a rock star in the world of trauma and infidelity and addiction. So today, it's right in your wheelhouse. We are going to talk about how complex PTSD makes healing from infidelity and or addiction very nuanced. Dare I say, it's a little bit more complicated. Dare I say, there are nuances to it that you cannot treat the same as if someone who didn't have PTSD or even complex PTSD. Is that all fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, you said it a lot nicer than I would say it. It's massively more complicated and more complex. So yeah.
Why don't you tell the audience what does complex PTSD look like?
So complex PTSD means that the client has suffered over a long-standing period of time, like years, multiple reoccurring traumatic experiences that impact their ability to trust other people in relationships, to trust their self, to trust their own sense of reality. Usually it involves interpersonal relationships close to someone in their own life that are supposed to be set up from childhood developmental years as the safest people in your life, and there's where betrayal has happened or abandonment, and it just keeps compounding. The child becomes an adult who never really got their feet underneath them to gain any kind of security of attachment in relationships.
So if someone's watching, male or female, what's a couple of guidelines to help them? Because so many betrayed spouses deal with just betrayal trauma. Then you throw complex PTSD. If they're suffering from it, what could be some markers that would help them? Because I'm wanting them to hear you, an expert in your own field, go, well, you know what? That makes sense. I've been talking to all these people who think I'm A, B, and C, or think I'm crazy, or God forbid they have an unfaithful partner who's shaming them and marginalizing them. How do we help them feel normal? What are some markers that could make them go, you know what? I'm not freaking crazy. I have complex PTSD.
I mean, crazy is just the straight term, but when I was getting diagnosed from Rick 14 years ago, what was helpful to me is I'm in groups I'm with all these other women, and I'm noticing differences in how they're recovering. I'm noticing differences in how they're responding to their spouse, how they're responding to different treatment protocols. I don't have any of this language back then. I was a marketing director, but I'm noticing I'm different. And so I said to Rick in one session, why are these other women responding so much better and they're getting better so much faster? And he said, because you have complex PTSD, their brains work better than yours. Their brain hasn't been through what yours has been through. And so he right away was able to normalize and put me at ease to basically say, I have a category. It's just different from theirs. And you're still going to get better, but there's going to be differences in how you need to move forward. Commitment, time. So he, right from the beginning, started to manage my expectations.
And I think that you said it really well. That was the tail end. When you have the right person helping you, they can help you manage expectations, right? They can help you understand. So many times we hear timelines and it's kind of like, well, maybe that timeline works, but it might be a little bit longer, and God help us, it might be a little bit shorter. But I have found those timeline articles or suggestions can be a little bit confusing, right?
Everything is on a spectrum. Everything is on a spectrum. So that can be something to get used to when people are coming in and they want to know, okay, what do I need to do? What am I going to do to get help? How long is it going to take? But we have to gain a lot of insight, information, and data in the beginning so that we can help them appropriately with what their prognosis is going to be and then what the timeline is going to look like. And then that's still theoretical until we actually start to get into it, because oftentimes is, I mean, because you're working in the field too, it's you're meeting with a client, you're doing couples work, and all of a sudden some big bomb will be dropped about, oh, and by the way, there was this. I did it to Rick several times in the first year. And then that informs prognosis. And he was like, and you waited to tell me this until now, why? And sometimes the client does it intentionally, but sometimes it's very subconscious, where I've had clients come to me and say, I don't know why I haven't told anybody this, or I haven't told you this until now. And then they drop something massive on me, like childhood sexual abuse or, physical abuse, or something that's really going to alter everything.
I think it's very well said. Some of the viewers might be watching me cough. I've been sick the last few days, but I don't want to edit that because it was so helpful and there's so much insight. Do you feel like those that suffer from complex PTSD, when they come into your office, do you feel like they almost have more hopelessness because they feel so like an outlier? They just feel like they've tried so many things that haven't worked. And so maybe you can make some suggestions. And to be fair, maybe somebody else who's an expert on your level can make suggestions. And they just kind of go, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense because of the nuance and the specialization that you have. Is that fair?
Right. So there's a lot of shame associated with it. So there's shame associated with, well, why can Sam do this work and he does a better job than me, right? Why can Jeannie do a better job than me? This couple is doing better than we are. So there's this shame with, why am I trying so hard and I have the same intentions and it's not working? And then there's also shame where Rick would say, okay, I need you to go and meet with this other clinician. I need you to go out and do EMDR. I need you to go and meet with a psychiatrist and get on medication. And so then you're like, well, all these other things for me. And again, it's just more of the shame, right? Like, I'm so broken. Or you then feel like you might get abandoned because you're like, oh my gosh, they're trying to put me with this person or this person. But the thing with complex PTSD is you have a team. Rick is my lead in a very big team over 14 years.
And do you feel like, I feel like in my work, so many people don't have teams. Do you feel like that's almost unheard of? I feel like it's almost unheard of. When I say to someone, we've got to build a team around you, they go, that's going to cost me $1 million. No, if you have friends who are safe, who are not going to per se advise you or give you the whole, well, if I were you, well, you're not, and you haven't been through infidelity. But I recommend free friends, groups that they can join online. I mean, is that fair to say that everyone needs a team around them?
Right? If you're dealing with complex trauma, there's usually a lot of isolation. And even, let's say in my case, there wasn't isolation. It wouldn't look like there was isolation on the outside, but the depth of my relationships where I let people in, that's where it was different. I mean, I was great at showing up for other people. And in the beginning, Rick said to me, you are no longer allowed to show up for anybody else. You are only allowed to have people in your life until I tell you otherwise that are going to show up for you. And I had like a massive panic attack.
Isn't that fair to say for everybody, not even complex PTSD? Isn't that a generalized statement that should be used for those that are in crisis, just dealing with betrayal trauma and infidelity, man or woman? That wouldn't that be, I mean, I feel like I say that to people, look, this is not a time to be showing up. I mean, you got to show up for your kids, let's be honest, right? And if your spouse is safe or partner is safe, but anybody that isn't really showing up for you probably doesn't need a place in your life when you're in crisis, right?
But what's the other thing that you know now too from working in the field? I mean, if you have complex PTSD, we pretty much know you have been betrayed multiple times, and that doesn't mean infidelity. It means you've been betrayed by people in your life that were supposed to show up for you, who said they were going to show up for you, and then the total opposite. And then we also know that you have abandonment trauma, right? So those two things right off the bat mean that this person is going to be an isolated person, even if they look like an extrovert on the outside. And we know that they're also going to struggle with boundaries. They're going to struggle with self-care, self-neglect. And so when we say to them, well, you now have to have people show up for you. I mean, where does the panic come from? You know where it comes from. I can't do that. I should, right? You smile because you know it.
But it's really heartbreaking because we have so many family of origin issues or childhood sexual abuse or childhood trauma. It's heartbreaking that we have this knee-jerk reaction to boundaries and high expectations. To me, it breaks my heart that it is so foreign when it should be the norm. Am I right?
Right. But norm for a complex PTSD survivor who then also has just been laid out with a new betrayal trauma. I mean, it's just challenging. And so building up that client, Rick had me read all the Boundaries books by Cloud and Townsend, Save People by Cloud and Townsend. And it's why he put me in a couple different 12-step programs that were really all about me being able to get rid of the shame associated with being able to set limits and say, I can't do these things anymore and I can't show up this way anymore. I have to focus on my own healing and the shame and the guilt that would come with that and how to be able to even say those things. So in the beginning, it's just trying to help the client realize you need more than other people that you're going to see around you trying to heal. And that's okay. There are reasons for that. You're not a loser. You're not weak.
You're not just difficult to deal with. So when you're dealing with this type of situation, how does this dual diagnosis change the treatment planning? How does it change the timeline?
So it extends the timeline and it increases the treatment plan. So if you have someone who doesn't have complex PTSD, they may be able to get away with doing a session a week. And you're going to give them some books to read. You're going to give them some ancillary material. You're going to tell them, rely on your support system. Here's the boundaries I want you to set. Increase the self-care that you already have, right? But a complex PTSD survivor who also now is suffering from betrayal trauma, and if their security of attachment really has only been with their spouse that now has been ripped out from under them, they are starting, their baseline is so low. So I try to be really upfront also with like budget and costs, right? I mean, I saw Rick twice a week at the beginning and I did 2 different intensives. So it was expensive. Like my income, I was super blessed that I could just kind of point my income at there. But we know, people take out credit cards, they take out loans. I've seen betrayed spouses send in their partners who then also had a dual diagnosis of complex trauma. So they had to go to inpatient treatment. The betrayed spouse was taking out 401k money to send their spouse into treatment because I was saying, I know this is unfair, but there's stuff going on there that has nothing to do with you, and they're acting out and they have to go to inpatient treatment to get well. So
let me ask you a question. You just said something. We won't open up the full can of worms, but we'll open up a small can. The question of fairness. Because I know if I'm a betrayed and I'm listening to that and I think, you're damn right, this is not fair. I mean, you're an expert, highly sought after. You've been through it. We don't have the time to get into your full story, but you've been through it and then some. When someone comes to you and says, it's just not fair, Amanda, I shouldn't have to deal with this. I shouldn't have to experience this. For the viewer or for the listener, Amanda's got her own childhood sexual abuse, her own family of origin trauma. She has a thrilling story that one day I hope you do put in a book, because I think it would change so many lives. You're already doing that with your caseload. But when someone goes to it's just not fair, how do you help them? I mean, what do you say to them that helps them understand it's not fair? But it doesn't mean that you still don't have to do your work to heal, because your life matters.
So I was just reading some articles in this psychoanalytic journal that I'm part of, and they were talking about the importance of this. So our job clinically to be able to say to the client, validate, it's not fair. What you have been dealt with in life has not been fair. Okay. If we can't help the client accept that first, okay, yeah, it's not fair. But then build hope, because you go to one or two directions. You go either into total despair, or you can pivot and say, okay, yes, life has kicked my ass and this is not fair, but I have the rest of my life to live. If you have kids, you're fighting for your own healing, regardless of if your spouse is getting on board with that. Your kids and your grandkids and the transgenerational aspects are huge. And so helping the client to find hope, to say, I have my clients read Viktor Frankl all the time, The Man's Search for Meaning, because if Holocaust survivors can come out of the Holocaust and some of them can find a way to still have hope and live, decent lives where they say, yes, I can feel happiness again. I can feel passion, joy, pleasure on the backdrop of what they experienced. Then I say, okay, we can do this.
And I think it's a brilliant concept, because you'll never win the debate to say, well, I know it's not fair, but suck it up. Like, that never works. Like, when you think about the tragedies that we have been subjected to, it is not fair. It is not fair what happened to me at a very young age. And it took me a long time to feel safe enough to talk about it with anybody and to process the anger around it. That's why finding safe people and a safe process is so vital. And when you're dealing with those is it fair to say, and I think it is, but you don't have to be a woman to be dealing with complex PTSD. I have met so many men who have PTSD or complex PTSD. Some are betrayed, some are not, right?
Right. So, the idea of triaging on a complex PTSD treatment plan, because we triage with our clients. So with men, the tragedy is sometimes as a woman, I can't convince them that they need just as much help. They deserve just as much help. It's okay. Like, just because they were born a man, it doesn't mean that the things that happen to them are not allowed to have the impact that they have had. And so sometimes, right, that's why I will punt to you or to Michael Webb, other clinicians and other coaches who have experienced complex trauma in their childhoods and in their adult lives, where they can have another man say to them, you're still a man. You're not any less of a man. And for you to do this work actually is massively courageous, and you deserve support. You deserve men, women, like anybody who's going to come up beside you. The shame, just like we see with men who have betrayal trauma from a spouse, the shame is so much deeper. But you're not dealing with a man. You are dealing with the boy who was abused growing up, right? You're dealing with that inner child. it's the adult ego state, the male ego state. We want to cultivate that. Is, this is part of the healing journey. This part of you is going to help us tend to this little boy who, it doesn't matter if he was a boy or a girl, these things happening rip a child's soul.
So let me ask you this. I love when we talk, because I always feel like I want to go, I'm going to say this to her because she's going to confirm it, or you'll take the other side of it and then we'll fight about it and all the viewers can watch. But, when Rick would host his intensive, he would stand up in front of, multiple couples, and he would say, guys, this is his opening thought. He would say, guys, most of what you're dealing with is due to unhealed childhood needs. And people look at him like, good Lord, I do not want to talk about my childhood. I came here to save my marriage, or to save my life, or to save, whatever. Like this, would you agree that most of what we deal with, and let's be honest, I'm teeing it up, I know the answer, but I want you to speak to it. Don't you agree that most of what we're dealing with is due to unhealed or unmet childhood needs?
Yes. But what I learned along the way is that if we can't unpack that for the client, then we will lose them. So when I was getting treated, I was at Mark Laser and Debbie Laser, his wife, at their treatment center in Minnesota around the same time I was meeting Rick. And so I was inpatient in an intensive there doing treatment. And they had this entire team that worked on family of origin trauma, and they kept pushing it. And I was so annoyed, because I was like, what in the world does family of origin have to do with me being right here now? And I was thoroughly agitated at the time, did not hide that at all. So having to explain, like what Rick then explained, who knows, years later, we as clients, because we both came into this field, on the other side of this, we're here because usually what happens is our resilience has been stripped. We don't have security of attachment in the relationships that we need to have them in order to build that resiliency, so that when something like this happens, infidelity, we don't absolutely unravel and crater out. And so I have met people who have gone through infidelity, and even sometimes on my caseload, but it looks very strange on my caseload, they don't need the intensity of treatment. They don't need the longevity. They don't need all the processing. They can see things very clearly, like, oh, this was my fault, right? Because sometimes you come in and the betrayed spouse will say, okay, yeah, this definitely I can own. Not that the affair was their fault, but they can say, yeah, something happened in my life and I checked out on the marriage. Or they can say, oh yeah, no, that's definitely my spouse's fault. And then they get to it and they get healing and they can depersonalize it and all that stuff. That's the difference between the people that hit my caseload or how I hit Rick's caseload.
Sure. When you think about complex PTSD, how does it impact the overall course of healing? I know that it changes it, but for someone who's watching and listening and they're like, dude, she is reading our mail. This is us. Like, no offense to any other clinician or coach or anybody, but they may be sitting here going, we've been trying to do this. This is exactly us. What the heck? So how do you speak to that?
So first of all, there's not enough of us, right? I mean, even you're not like, oh, I'm going to deal with complex trauma and coach, and the opportunity presents itself and we all get around you, Michael Webb and this, and we're like, oh no, you have to do this, because we're in such desperate need for people who not only are already kind of in the industry, but then they've also been through it, because we know that informs prognosis and treatment also. So there's not enough of us. If you land close to my caseload, there are times that I will have to punt off to Michael Webb, Sharon and James, Cara Weed, because I don't even have the bandwidth. You have to have a lot of bandwidth as a clinician, number one, to work with complex PTSD, especially if both spouses have complex PTSD. And so we have to look at our caseloads and then what's going on in our own lives and say, do we have enough to manage this? Because it takes so much extra, even from the clinician. And then we have to be talking to whoever is going to be prescribing them psychotropics, right? I have a client on my caseload right now. It's back and forth between the practitioner and myself, because again, there's not enough psychiatrists out there right now either. So this is a general practitioner trying to get my client on a psychotropic that works for her. I mean, it's constant back and forth. So we call them non-billable hours that we do. It's more extensive. And then same with the client. So the client they need more support. They're interfacing more. There's more adjustments on the treatment plan as they go along, and we get to know them better and their trauma.
Okay.
So
it makes great sense. You said something a few sentences ago about when couples or individuals unravel. I mean, we're almost done today, but if you could take a couple of minutes to the man or woman who's unraveling, like there's so much in us that we don't even talk about with therapists that we're terrified of. There's so much that we don't even know where to start. For the person that feels like their lives are unraveling, they just feel like nothing's working. I mean, take a minute or two. You've been at the depths of just hopelessness and despair. You have found yourself in the lowest points of your life that you don't even think that you could be that low. Take a minute or two and encourage those people who are unraveling and maybe give them some direction on what's a next step. What can they do?
So hopelessness and despair. If the struggle is with hopelessness and despair, then your first stop, this is going to sound so, is antidepressants. So if you are so low that you feel like you don't even have the fight to try to fight for yourself, then that's like the first stop is, okay, you need to get some help, and we need to go the fastest, easiest way, which is let's look at antidepressants. Because if you are in such a dark place that you can't fight for yourself, the best clinicians in the world won't be able to help pull you out of that without some medical intervention. But then also, what do you put in your head? So Rick was very careful, and he was very disciplined and direct with me to say, you need to be putting things in your head about people who were overcoming. Anything that he could get in front of me that I could resonate with about overcoming. That's the Viktor Frankl, that's the Richard Rohr, that anything. So that puts hope into someone to say, just because it's so bad doesn't mean that this is going to be the rest of my life. Just because you're never going to be the same. Just because I'm never going to be like people who haven't experienced the things that I have experienced, because it does change your brain forever. It doesn't mean that I am not going to, for the most part, enjoy my life, love my life. So it's not like, oh, these things have happened and now that's it, you're done. You should just lay down and die. It's not true.
And so does someone have complex PTSD forever? Can they be healed? Is there hope for the person that says, I have so much trauma, Sam, I don't know that I could ever feel normal again? I mean, I know the answer, but I want you to speak to it.
So with prognosis and CPTSD, is a mouthful. You're not going to look like someone who hasn't had developmental complex trauma. You may or may not need to be on medication for the rest of your life. You are going to need a lot of different treatment and interventions in maintenance program, but some people recover and they live really great lives and they don't suffer daily in an intense kind of a way. But if you take, say, a veteran who came back from war, I mean, they are always going to have triggers. The intensity of the triggers, how often the triggers come, how they handle it, and the people that are supporting them, that's really what makes all the difference. And so then it becomes integrated and it becomes normalized.
Man, I think so many people want to feel normal again. Like, there's so many men and women who are just like, dude, I'd love to feel normal again. So as we say goodbye, for those of you that are watching and listening, if you want to find more videos from Amanda that I have done, you can go onto YouTube, and here's just some search words that you can use: sexual abuse, defense mechanisms of the betrayed, narcissistic supply, which is one of my favorite videos because we kind of went toe to toe on that. And then self-sabotage. You can search all of those terms and Amanda Asproni on YouTube, and you'll find some of her old videos. So, Amanda, if they want to reach out to you about seeing you, if they want to try and get on their caseload, if they want to find you, how do they find you?
My website is healingaffairscounseling.com, and you can find all the contact information for me there and reach out. And if I can't get you on my caseload, then, I mean, we all try to be really good with referring out so that we can find somebody else to recommend that we know either has the bandwidth or the expertise that you need.
As we say goodbye today, I try and end a lot of these podcasts with just a personal note to say, listen, I know if you're dealing with infidelity or addiction or some type of childhood sexual abuse or even childhood family of origin trauma, listen, it is so alienating. You may or may not have complex PTSD, but I know you probably feel alone and you probably feel misunderstood and you probably feel a combination of hopelessness, anger, vengeance, rage, and just incredible sadness. But I just want you to know it's clinicians like Amanda, and there's so many more out there. And there's safe people for you. There are safe people that want to help you and support you. And don't believe the lie that says this is as good as it's going to get. It will never get any better. That is not the truth. That's a lie. It may take some work. It may take some labor. It may take a lot of patience and a lot of tears and a lot of hard work. And it may take a lot of sessions, as Amanda has alluded to. But I just want to tell you, as one survivor to another, you can absolutely heal. So you can reach out to me at samshealingpodcast@gmail.com. You can drop a comment below on this video. If you have questions for Amanda, you can post comments here too. She'll be happy to answer. And don't give up on yourself. Keep going. And Amanda, as always, thank you so much for coming in and joining me today.
Great to see you.